The modern history of the area began when the early French settlers, coming up the river from Louisiana, discovered, above the treacherous water, the Signal Hill of a friendly tribe of Indians. These settlers decided to make their homes here on the hill, with its beautiful view of the surrounding country. Some years after this first French settlement, the presence of coal, which covered the entire area, was discovered, and the inevitable coal mines were started. Just as naturally, the powder mill sprang up to manufacture the explosives for the use in the mine.
It has not been determined whether the coal mines were started and then the railroad was built to reach the mines, or vice versa. All coal was hauled by teams of horses or railroads, and the first railroad was the Illinois and St. Louis Railroad and Coal Company. Their first property was acquired September 21, 1870. Consolidated Coal Company owned the Pittsburgh mine, which was diagonal from Sir Mac's Tavern. This mine was in operation in 1900 and was located on the north side of the railroad in the Powder Mill Woods. This mine was abandoned in 1925. The suburban mine was located near the former East St. Louis and Suburban Railroad, approximately 200 feet from the school on Lillian Lane, which is now Signal Park Lane. It operated from 1902 to 1928. The William Avery Truck Mine was located west and adjacent to the former TV station, which is now an oral surgical office. It was purchased in 1917 by R.S.J. Fowler, who renamed the company Signal Hill Coal Company. The mines were interconnected, and one could enter the Signal Hill Coal Company's mines and walk through the other coal mines, making his exit as far east as 2900 West Main Street. The coal mines were all shaft type, which went vertically. There were few drift mines, which went horizontally into the earth. These were along the bluffs. During this time, coal was dynamited loose and dug with pick and shovel. The cars which held the coal were four-wheeled and had about a 3-ton capacity. They were pulled by mules. Interestingly, many mules never saw light, as they were born underground.
The Phoenix Powder Manufacturing Company first purchased land on June 30, 1892 for their plant. They acquired approximately 160 acres adjoining the Illinois and St. Louis Railroad Coal Company. Data indicates they had approximately a $500,000 company. They produced a black powder used mostly for dynamiting coal, and they also produced gunpowder. As a result of the hazards of gunpowder production, many buildings were built to minimize the frequent explosions that often occurred. Their raw materials, semi-finished materials, and completed products were hauled within their property on their own narrow-gauge railroad in four-wheel, 3-ton cars. They were pulled by mules wearing leather shoes to eliminate sparks, which could cause explosions. There was a serious explosion that killed 3 employees and did much damage to the property and the entire area. The financial burden of this explosion caused the company to abandon operation in 1923. The property lay idle until 1948, when it was purchased by the T.J. Moss Tie Company that produced railroad ties. It was then purchased in 1952 by Mr. and Mrs. W.J. Shive and Mr. and Mrs. Roy Levine, who developed Powder Mill Woods subdivision.
In the early 1900s, Signal Hill Boulevard had its beginnings, when 4 houses were built using pillars and other materials from the St. Louis World's Fair. A real estate brochure stated the following: Signal Hill Place is a high plateau comprising of 324 acres of choice resident property. The subdivision is traversed by a street, boulevard, 125 feet wide, with a grass plat 25 feet wide running along the center. Restricted to residences only. Add to the charms of a country home with no city taxes to pay. Signal Hill Place offers as good, if not superior, home sites than West St. Louis, at prices ranging from $5 to $20 per foot, and within 30 minutes car ride of 3rd Street and Washington Avenue, St. Louis, on the most modern and best equipped electrical streetcars in the country.
The first school building in this area was begun in 1904 in the Briar Hill section known as the Pittsburgh School, with one teacher in a one-room school. In 1904, the Signal Hill Syndicate was formed, and the syndicate donated a lot for the school and the church. Pittsburgh School was closed in 1910. As the area grew, a new school was built in 1909. The architect for the building was A.B. Frankel, and the contractor was the Bauer brothers. The original school board was composed of Carr Smith, Ed Woodson, and Frank Hiles. The original construction was a two-story, four-room building. Early educational leaders were C.C. Worthy, Fred Moser, J.J. Renner, E.W. Schmallenberger, and H.B. Black. In the graduating class of 1913, only one of the 13 students passed the exams and received a diploma. 5 students, however, did continue their education at East St. Louis High School.
The 1920 era began and the Dayline trolley was started, carrying visitors to the Hill and residents of the Hill to their places of business. Among the groups regularly using the trolley was a Red Cross unit, whose members at the close of World War I realized that their services would no longer be needed. As they discussed what they would do with their spare time, they came up with the idea of a school pageant. This was in late 1918. The first pageant was produced in 1920. Signal Hill School presented a small play entitled Trees of the Blazed Trail. This was presented in the Natural Amphitheater behind the school. The following year, the entire student body, including the orchestra and the chorus, participated in the first big pageant entitled The Homeseekers. 8 teachers and Principal Schmallenberger performed as well. In ensuing years, 35 different pageants were presented, involving every student and focusing on a variety of themes and topics.
As the area grew and more room was needed, the size of the school was increased. In 1923, one of the first kindergartens in the area was established at Signal Hill. The school was built over a worked-out mine. Later, the southeast corner sank so badly that the school was ordered closed, and the pupils were transferred to the Signal Hill Methodist Church across the street for classes. Not only did the school conduct classes in the church, but church services and Sunday school classes were conducted in the Signal Hill 3rd grade classroom prior to the church being built. The pulpit was the teacher's desk, and McKendree College provided a student minister. Mr. Carr Smith and Mr. C. W. Hollenbeck were having a neighborly chat and decided to invite all to come to a community Sunday school, which was to be held in the schoolyard. Invitations were written on the sidewalks with chalk. Later, Mr. Hollenbeck, anxious to build a church, donated the lot across from the school for this purpose. Mr. Carr served as Sunday school superintendent for many years.
Blessed Sacrament Catholic Parish was organized in the year 1926 when the Reverend Joseph M. Mueller was appointed the first Catholic pastor of all the territory that roughly bounded 74th Street, Route 13, the L&N tracts, and the bottom of Edgemont Hill. At first, the church bought property at 95th and West Main Street, but later traded this tract for vacant property located in the 8800 and 8900 blocks on West Main Street. Father Louis F. L., formerly of Shawneetown, Illinois, assumed the pastorate of Blessed Sacrament Church in 1930 and remained in that capacity until his retirement in 1971. The area continued to grow. In the early 1930s, when a fire destroyed a house at No. 9 Signal Hill Boulevard, the Signal Hill Improvement Association was organized by Paul Apt, Robert Broderick, and S.J. Fowler. Money was raised to install fire plugs, and the association contracted with East St. Louis to provide fire protection for the area. In January of 1946, however, the East St. Louis Fire Commissioners announced that they would no longer provide fire services to outside areas. On February 8, 1946, a 15-person committee was appointed to create a fire protection district. To finance the purchase of equipment and property, bonds were sold to area residents for $25. And on April 2, 1946, the Articles of Incorporation were signed. The first Signal Hill Fire Department picnic was held in 1947. World War II had just ended, and the feeling of camaraderie and unity was in the air. The entire community joined together to make the Signal Hill picnic a huge success. Barbecue ribs were a tradition from the very beginning and continue to the present. In addition, memories of the picnic years remain in the hearts and minds of all who attended these wonderful events, which sadly ended in 1988.
Father L. arrived at Blessed Sacrament during the Great Depression. Thus, economic conditions made it impossible for several years to do more than meet the interest on the property. Eventually, the parish population grew, the economy improved, and Blessed Sacrament made plans for a new school. The cornerstone was placed on Memorial Day, 1940, and it was solemnly dedicated on September 1 of that year.
Our country expanded from 48 to 50 states during the 1950s. During this time, the school district also underwent major changes. As the area expanded, the 3-member Board of Directors became a 7-person Board of Education in 1954. 13 candidates ran for this new 7-member board, and Dr. Harold McCann was elected with 614 votes, followed by Ruth Scrivener with 537 votes. Incidentally, Ruth Scrivener was the first woman elected to the Signal Hill Board of Education.
After voters approved the construction of a $500,000 building in September 1952, work was begun. At this time, the Association of Parents and Teachers was formed, with Dr. Max M. Goldenberg serving as its first president. The building was constructed in 2 sections over a 3-year period from 1953 to 1955. H.B. Black retired in 1958, and William C. Weber became the newly appointed superintendent principal. Mr. Weber provided educational leadership until his retirement in 1980.
During 1958, Judy McCann composed the original words for the school fight song, sung to the tune of the Minnesota Rousers.
The need for additional facilities resulted in an addition to the Signal Hill building in 1966 and 1967. The new music area and the junior high school classrooms were consequently added, encompassing the area of the natural amphitheater. As a result, the era of the pageants came to an end in 1966. This then opened the door to the first school play, which has become an annual event that continues to the present. The powder mill packed 12,000 kegs of powder a day. Each keg weighed 25 pounds, and the powder was made of charcoal, sulfur, and other materials. Sometimes nails would drop in the powder, and when it was being ground, the nails would cause sparks, and there would be explosions, or the machinery would get too hot and cause hot boxes. The men ate their meals together in a boarding house, and the children's job was to fan the tables and the food in the kitchen to keep the flies away. In August 1896, something in the powder caused a fire. There was debris flying through the sky, so much it was black. It happened about noon, and a man, Charles Mullage, had left the mill in the morning to assist in the threshing of his uncle's wheat. This was customary at the time to take off and help with the crops, and returned about noon, changed back into his mill clothes, which were full of powder, and when the explosion occurred, he was ablaze immediately. There was not much water, the creeks were dry, and he was burned beyond recognition. Some of the damage was taken care of by the company, and the company was told to move out of the city, and they moved to Wolf Lake, Indiana.
The building, erected in the late 1800s at the southwest corner of Millie Street and Foley Drive, possesses an interesting history. Initially, this structure was built by the Atlas Powder Company of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as a multiple-purpose facility for the powder mill workers and their families. The north door acted as the entrance to the United States Post Office for the town of Pittsburgh, Illinois, while the south door provided the entry for a general store and a saloon. A second story was utilized dually as a town meeting hall and a Saturday night dance hall. This edifice stood idle for a period of time after a series of explosions closed the powder mill. Then, at the conclusion of Prohibition, the building reopened as Sir Mac's Tavern, also known as the Briar Hill Country Club, and was patronized by local residents until the mid-60s. Currently, this first outpost is being inhabited as a single-family residence.
Growing up on the boulevard in the 1950s and attending what was then called Belleville Township High School immediately generates the memory of a yellow school bus traveling down Signal Hill Boulevard each morning and each afternoon to pick up high school students and later return them to their homes. Youngsters could be seen standing in clusters at each corner of the boulevard waiting for the bus to make its appearance. Often, in inclement weather, porches were utilized as waiting areas. Since all the passengers were from the Signal Hill area, camaraderie reigned on these interesting bus rides, which, incidentally, were free at the time. One simply went to the high school office and requested bus passes, which were provided free of charge. No one who experienced this pleasant time can recall waiting for and riding the school bus without smiling a bit, as not only was the ride convenient and comfortable, but also the company was entertaining and enjoyable.
As I remember life on Bluff Road in the early 50s, I quickly recall the sight of an individual who frequently rode her horse right through our yard. On one of these occasions, our faithful family pet gave chase and scared the wits out of the interloper, who was never seen in our yard again. In fact, never seen in the whole neighborhood again. Yes, horseback riders were seen in the area years ago. This was not an uncommon sight way back when.
Often I think back of living on Signal Hill, the great gold and green leafy boulevard with all the beautiful homes. Next door, my grade school classmate, Mary Lynn Ellis, had a shingle playhouse. Mary Lynn lived in the stately white brick house they showed on the CBS TV 60 Minutes entitled A Tale of Two Cities. A few houses down, an older girl whom I cannot remember seeing except for the day she dashed out from under a canopy at her outdoor wedding, also had a playhouse in her backyard. This one was brick. Most women did not go out to work in the 1940s when I lived on Signal Hill, and life on the boulevard then revolved mainly around the activities of Signal Hill School, Signal Hill Methodist Church, and the St. Clair County Garden Club. Signal Hill School was a 3-story red brick building when I attended there. Across the street from the school there was a little house straight out of a fairy tale where we went for penny candy. Every June, families and friends enjoyed a whole summer's day at the annual school picnic. During the day, food and games abounded. In the evening, a pageant, and in later years an operetta was performed in the natural amphitheater behind the school. I remember especially the busy preparations of teachers and mothers sewing the frilly organdy costumes for the period operetta, My Old Kentucky Home, and the sweet, soft music of Stephen Foster wafting through the balmy night air. The boys played on a lower playground while the girls remained on the upper level. Leaning over the long white fence while sitting on the steps leading down to the playground, we watched the boys play baseball against our main rival, Blessed Sacrament Church School. Our Girl Scout troop held meetings in a school classroom. At the end of our meetings, we went down to the boys' playground to hold hands in a circle and sing, I'm Going to Let It Shine. Also, it was on hikes to Bluff Park with our troop led by Adrienne Carell's mother and her big sister that I tasted s'mores for the first time. One of the most anticipated events of the year was the ice cream social on the grounds of Signal Hill Methodist Church. It brought church members and the Signal Hill neighbors together for a delightful summer evening at the entrance to the boulevard.